My name is Mark, and I was 24 when I took a security gig at the old Banning Tower. It was a beautiful Art Deco office building, but mostly empty after hours. My job was simple: patrol the floors, check the locks, and make sure no one was lingering. The hours were from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and for the first few weeks, it was just me and the silence. One night, around 2 a.m., I was on the 11th floor. The air conditioning was off, and the silence was so thick, it felt like a blanket. As I walked past a row of floor-to-ceiling windows, I saw something in my reflection, a flicker of movement behind me. I stopped dead, my heart hammering against my ribs. In the reflection of the glass, I saw a figure standing in the doorway of the last office on the hall. It was a tall, shadowy shape, completely motionless. My blood ran cold. I slowly turned my head to look directly at the doorway. Nothing. The office was dark and empty. I convinced myself it was a trick of the light, the way the moon hit the glass. I continued my patrol, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. As I passed the windows again, I glanced at my reflection. There it was again, the same dark figure. This time, it seemed closer, right behind my reflected self. But as I turned, the hallway was still empty. The terror was getting to me. I decided to make one more pass, but this time I would ignore my reflection. I wouldn't look at the glass. I walked the length of the hall, my eyes fixed on the empty offices. I was almost to the stairwell when I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I froze. A whisper, dry and raspy, spoke right into my ear. "Don't look at the window, Mark." I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. No one. The hallway was still, and the silence was deafening. My whole body was shaking. I turned to run, but in the polished metal of the stairwell door, I caught my reflection one last time. Behind me, the shadowy figure was gone. Instead, there was a woman with a desperate, pleading expression on her face, and her mouth was moving. She was silently screaming a name at me. The name wasn't hers. It was mine. I'm Sarah, and I'm 29. For the last 5 years, I've worked as a night janitor at a major city hospital. You get used to the weirdness. The long, empty hallways, the sterile smell, the occasional equipment alarm that goes off for no reason. But one night, I started hearing something different. It was a child's voice, a soft, faint call. "Help me," it would say, always in the same pleading tone, as if from a distance. The sound seemed to be coming from the old pediatric oncology wing on the 3rd floor, which had been closed for over a decade. I'd told my coworkers about it, but they just laughed and said it was probably an old radio, or my imagination playing tricks. I knew it wasn't. The voice was too real, too clear, and it was always the same 2 words. Every night, around 3 a.m., the call would start. I found myself drawn to that floor, walking the dark halls with my mop bucket and my headphones off, just listening. One night, the voice sounded closer than ever. I was at the very end of the hall, where a large, heavy door with a padlock was bolted shut. The old pediatrics wing. The voice, a little girl's, seemed to be right on the other side. "Help me," it whispered, so close I could almost feel her breath. I was terrified, but also felt a powerful need to help. My rational mind told me to leave, but my heart ached for this little ghost. I noticed a small loose panel on the wall next to the door. Prying it open, I saw a network of wires and a small speaker connected to a tiny microchip. The voice wasn't a ghost, it was a loop. As my finger touched the wire to disconnect it, I heard a new sound, a different voice. It was a man's, coming from the speaker, but not from the chip. It was live. "Oh, Sarah," the voice said, a slow, calm, and menacing tone. You weren't supposed to find that. Now I know you've been listening. You've been a very good subject." The lights in the hallway went out, and the single, low hum of a computer server room started to fill the silence. A soft, automated chime echoed from the door behind me. I turned, and the door was now locked. The voice was not a ghost. It was a program, a system, and I was just a part of its experiment. My name is David, and I'm 35 years old. I work the graveyard shift at an all-night convenience store in a sleepy town called Blackwood. The nights are usually uneventful. A couple of truckers, some late-night teenagers, and that's about it. One night, a little past 4 a.m., a man walked in. He was soaking wet, and his clothes looked like they'd been through a fight. But what was most unsettling was his face. It was a mask of pure terror, his eyes wide and unfocused. He didn't say a word. He just walked to the candy aisle and grabbed a single pack of peppermint chewing gum. He came to the counter, dropped a handful of coins on the tray, and just stared at me. His hands were shaking. As I rang him up, he glanced at the window, a look of profound fear on his face. When I handed him his change, he didn't take it. Instead, he carefully placed a small folded piece of paper on the counter. Then, without a word, he turned and ran out the door and disappeared into the rain. I called after him, but he was gone. I picked up the note. It was a small torn piece of a paper bag. On it, in neat, capital letters, was a single word: watch. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. What was I supposed to watch for? I looked out the window, but there was nothing but the downpour. The note seemed to be a warning, but a warning of what? I stood there for a few minutes, trying to figure it out, when the bells on the door chimed again. Another person was walking in. It was a young woman, also looking a little worse for wear, but her expression was one of calm exhaustion. She looked at me and smiled, her eyes flickering over the counter where the note lay. She then looked out the window at the parking lot, a calm and expectant look on her face. Just then, my phone, which was on the counter next to the note, buzzed with a text message. It was a single picture. A picture of the back of my store, a dark alley, and the soaking wet man from before, his terror-stricken face frozen in a scream. In the corner of the picture, a small black figure with a knife was visible. The message that came with the picture was simple: "You're next." I looked at the young woman, and her smile was gone. Her eyes, which were once calm, were now filled with a predatory hunger. She wasn't a victim. She was the hunter, and the man had left the note not to warn me, but to mark me as the next one to be watched.